Okay, so you can see how easily I was able to do that. Now, the camera I'm speaking into is on the same exact setup as what I just previously showed you, but that setup is actually behind my computer screen. So I've got that same mini clamp back there. I've got the same OM arm attached to that and the same M3 adapter at the top. And behind my screen, I can click in and then manipulate or move that arm to any position that I need, as well as change the angle of the camera. So those are those two setups. They're identical, but I'm using them in different ways. Now, speaking of what's on my desktop, I am speaking into a microphone. I'm not speaking into it, but you're hearing it. It's right above my head. And this was a very important addition to what I keep on my desktop as far as Triad-Orbit goes, because it was the same problem. I needed to have it above my head, but I needed the boom arm. I needed everything out of the shot. So this has been an ideal setup. So let me talk about where all that starts and how that comes together. It starts with what's called the wall mount, and it's called the IOW. It's basically a wall plate with that same quick change coupler that I spoke about. Now, we'll get to the wall mounted plates that I have, but you can also use that same wall mount to put on your desktop. And in my case, I've got it right on top of my, my 4-space rack. So that's been bolted in. The next piece that would go into that is a long telescoping arm. That's ideal. As far as the length of that arm, I can kind of raise or lower things to where I need them depending on where I want that mic positioned. That's ideal, so I click that in. Now the next thing that I will click in is called the EXT2S. That's a very important piece because it allows me to spin the arm one way or the other. Because otherwise, if I'm spinning that arm in and out without that, it'll work okay, but eventually what's going to happen is the clutch on that arm is going to start loosening up and then my stand might drop in height. So that is an ideal piece. So the EXT2S was very important. On top of that is the O1L. That is the longer version, the bigger version of the OM arm that I had on my desk. I needed a way longer telescope on that. It goes out to 37.5 inches, which allows me, once again, to have that overhead mic in several different positions without running out of range, and it works great. Now, on the end of that, instead of using an M3, what I've done is I've got a standard mic clip attached to the end of the arm, and it works perfectly. I could use an M3, but in this case, I didn't really need that. And then also, I'm using another accessory from Triad-Orbit called the cable control. And it's awesome because it just allows me to quickly get cables, because if those cables were hanging down from that mic, it probably would end up in my shot. So that's been absolutely ideal. So that's how that setup works. Once again, workflow game changer. I can move that mic out of the way when I'm not using it, but when I'm setting up, I just swing it out and I'm good to go. So let's talk about my lighting and those wall mounts. I've got 4 wall mounts. I've got 2 that are behind my desk. So this is the shot facing me now, and my lights right now are in that position. But I'm also able to take those lights and move them to separate wall mounts behind me on the opposite wall for when I want to shoot in the other direction, the direction I started shooting in. Now in this case, those lights aren't back there because I'm able to have some sunlight coming in. But if I was shooting at night, what I would do is I would take these lights and I would move them to the other wall to face, in a different camera direction. So that works great. I'm using the wall mounts, as I mentioned, with the quick couplers. I've got arms that I'm using out of the wall mounts so that I can have the lights come out away from the wall. And those arms can be adjusted in or out as needed from the wall. And then, of course, at the end of those arms, I'm using, once again, my M3 adapters. And in this case, they're set up to basically screw into the LED lights that I'm using. So being able to just, without having to get out big light stands and move things around, I can just, in a pretty quick succession, take these pieces apart, the lights, and go ahead and move them behind me, and I'm good to go. Okay, so I've talked about everything that I use in this room. I want to go back to the audio side of it and the microphone side of it, because I have a separate room that I use, a separate closet for miking up my cabinets. And that closet's all soundproofed and sounds great, but it is very small, so space is at a premium in there, floor space. So same concept, I needed a way smaller footprint in there to get all these cabinets mic'd up. So the perfect solution for that was the TM Mini. It's the little, basically the little brother to the T3. It has a very small footprint. It's shorter, obviously, and it works out perfectly because what I've got attached to that is called the O2X, and it's a dual arm orbital boom. And it's just ideal because basically it splits that stand into two mounts that I can then attach different length arms to via those quick couplers once again, and then up to different mounts, or I should say adapters at the end of those that I can point at my cabinets. I've got 3 cabinets in there that I like to mic up. Now I never have them all mic'd up and running at once, but I do have like a main cabinet, and you can see in there I've got a Royer and a 57 off of one side of that O2X. And then going up to the cab above is my red plate cabinet. That's an open back cabinet with a different speaker in it. I like to just keep a Royer on that. But what I really like to be able to do is mic occasionally that rev cabinet that's down on the floor there because it's got a different speaker and a different tonality, but I still just like to use the ribbon. So the way I was able to set this up was I've got this really tiny footprint on a stand that's still pretty heavy, and basically every bit, not even basically, it's every bit as adjustable as the Big Brother T3 stand is, but it's got enough weight that I can have all these mics on it and actually manipulate that top mic. I can actually just swing it down and use the adapter that's on there, the swivel adapter, to replace that Royer on the cabinet on the other side without worrying about the whole thing tipping over and having it turn into a disaster. So once again, what's in there is the TM, the Mini is where it starts. What's clicked into the top of that is the O2X, which is ideal, and it's got different length arms. And what I will say is at the end of those arms, instead of using the M3 adapters, I'm using the M2 adapters. It was much easier to go with the M2 adapters. So I really appreciate you guys checking out Triad-Orbit's products. There's so much information on the website. I still go there quite often just to get new ideas because it's just so complex in the things you can do with these products. But if you got any further questions, go to the site and check it out. And as always, I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you next time.